Welcome to the Deep Dive. Ever feel like you're talking at people rather than with them? Like you have great ideas, but they just don't seem to land. Or maybe you just want to get things done collaboratively without, the usual friction. Well, you're definitely in the right place today. We're diving deep into the fascinating world of human connection and, the practical art of actually getting things done with other people. Our source material for this deep dive is a really insightful book, Making Connections, Getting Things Done with Other People by Nico, Swan, and Erik Boers, first published back in 2012. So our mission today, it's really to distill the core ideas from these pages. Think of it like getting the essence of a pretty powerful model for understanding influence and communication. We will explore this framework, these lenses, you could say, to help you navigate those, often tricky interactions in life and work, turning potential friction into productive connection, hopefully.
And what's really compelling about this source material, I think, is its intensely practical focus. It doesn't just sit there describing concepts. It actually gives you tools. The aim is to help you dissect your own behavior, and consciously discover ways to become more effective when you're trying to influence others, whether that's getting buy-in for a project or maybe resolving a conflict or just building stronger relationships. And as the title kind of suggests, conversation is placed right at the core of this. It's seen as the fundamental tool.
Okay, so let's start there with something that seems simple but is actually pretty profound, conversation itself. The book points out just how much of our lives we spend talking and listening, at home, with friends, and definitely at work. It's constant, right? Why is this activity, this back and forth of words, so central to who we are and what we do?
Well, the source argues that conversation is absolutely foundational to human connection. It's not just background noise. It's the mechanism. It's how we build rapport, how we share meaning, how we coordinate action. It highlights that a lack of connection between people, whether that's personal relationships, communities, organizations, it has real, tangible, negative consequences. It impacts everything from individual well-being to, say, economic productivity, even the functioning of democracy. And conversely, a good conversation, that's described as one of the most valuable aspects of life, something inherently nourishing, stimulating, something people actually seek out.
Right. But then there's the painful opposite, isn't there? That feeling of talking into a void, like your words just hit a wall and nobody's truly hearing or engaging. The source calls this state a serious disorder, which, wow, that's quite a strong term. But it captures that sense of profound disconnection, doesn't it? It really underlines the point that talking only makes sense if someone else is actually listening and processing what you're saying. Without that genuine connection, that receiving of the message, any attempt to influence, to move things forward together is, it's basically impossible.
And that inability to connect, that's precisely what leads to those futile business meetings, the source describes. Remember that anecdote about the incomprehensible meeting? People just talking past each other, making eloquent points, sure, but showing zero sign of internalizing or responding to what anyone else said. They end up exactly where they started. It's a perfect, if maybe a bit depressing, example of conversation failing its core purpose. Mm-hmm. Shared understanding and coordinated action. Bad conversation isn't just frustrating, it's a massive waste of vital energy and time. It drains people, it really does, because it fails to meet that basic human need for meaningful interaction.
Right. And the importance of effective conversation is only, amplified in today's work environment. The book links it directly to modern organizational trends. Things like flatter hierarchies mean you need more peer-to-peer influence, not just top-down orders. Multidisciplinary teams, they require people with totally different expertise to truly understand each other. Global and dispersed teams rely entirely on communication to bridge distance and culture. And professionals, they increasingly value autonomy. You can't just tell them what to do anymore. You need to engage them. Cooperation is the name of the game, really. And cooperation is fundamentally the coordination of effort through conversation.
Yeah, and this context makes the source's point that talking isn't just reporting or explaining, it's action. That really resonates. When someone in an organization says, do something, it's not just a request for activity, it's a call to initiate motion, to get something moving. And being action-oriented includes showing initiative, which often starts with talking about what needs to happen, proposing ideas, articulating intent.
Okay, but there's that classic counterpoint, isn't there? You often hear it from people who are brilliant at their craft, especially maybe in technical fields. Let my actions speak for themselves. What's the risk there, according to the source?
The risk is significant invisibility. really. Doing excellent work in isolation just doesn't automatically guarantee it'll be noticed or understood in its full value by others. Without explaining the why and the value behind your actions, without the conversation around them, your initiative can easily be overlooked. Or your work might just be perceived as, normal output, nothing special. The source poses the question, what is it that is so important about attention and time regarding explaining your actions? And the implicit answer, drawn from psychologist Carl Weick's work, cited in the book, is that discussion itself is just crucial in organizations. It helps people make sense of complex situations, it gives meaning to their efforts, and it's essential because, fundamentally, we are social creatures. We need to talk to coordinate work, seek solutions, and achieve goals together.
So effective communication, especially good discussion, is vital not just for getting things done, but for those deeper human needs at work too. Things like connection, coordination, contribution, recognition, making sense of it all. If you want to influence, if you want to thrive in this kind of environment, you really have to attend to these needs. And conversation is the main vehicle.
Which brings us nicely to the core framework of this deep dive, the 3 dimensions of influence. The fundamental idea here is that pretty much all forms of human communication, from a simple request to a complex negotiation, are ultimately attempts to influence each other. And verbal communication is highlighted as, well, often the most important tool for building connection and achieving that influence.
Right. Tell us about the origins of this model. It's not completely brand new, right?
That's right. The source material builds on an older model, PPI, by Harrison and Berlew, which used 4 styles. Swan and Boers simplified this down to 3 dimensions. They were influenced by key values like openness, trust, authenticity, and they incorporated research from speech act theory, people like Searle and Austin, and relationship theory from Flores and Simons. The goal was really to create a model that's practical and easy to use, something that lets you map and understand communication behaviors.
And what are these 3 dimensions? Can you break them down for us?
Sure. Each dimension represents a distinct intention and focus in communication. First, the I dimension. This is about you, the speaker. Your intention is to be heard, to clearly articulate what you think, what you want, your ideas, your position.
Okay, the I. Got it.
Then there's the you dimension. This shifts the focus entirely, over to the other person. Your intention here is to truly take what they have to say seriously, to understand their perspective, their thoughts, their feelings.
So I then you.
Exactly. And finally, the we dimension. This is about the space between you and the other person. The intention is to build a bridge, acknowledge the shared reality, maybe share your own feelings and needs, basically create a productive, trusting relationship where you can move forward together.
So the I is about asserting yourself, putting your view out there. The you is about understanding the other person. And the we is about building that connection between you both. Let's start by unpacking the I dimension a bit more. What does that actually look like in practice?
Okay, the I dimension is where you make your individual presence felt. You become visible, you become audible. The source identifies 4 primary behaviors here: requesting, reasoning, promising, and declaring. So, requesting. This is asking the other person to agree to do something, or sometimes not to do something. You're initiating an action on their part. Examples can range from a pretty soft suggestion like, let's think this over for a day, maybe, to something more direct like, I suggest we analyze the data, or even affirm, I must insist that you complete your report by Friday. The specific wording you choose depends on the level of pressure the situation seems to require. Then there's reasoning. This is all about backing up your statements with logic, facts, or experience. You're presenting evidence to support your position. When you reason, you're implicitly committing to the truth or accuracy of your statements. You're aiming to lead the listener to a conclusion based on that evidence. Examples might be citing studies recent studies have shown, or explaining a logical step. If we agree about this, then the logical next step is. The source notes reasoning is often the least personal of these I-dimension behaviors. It focuses more on objective data, less on subjective feelings or personal positions. Next up, promising. This is making a commitment yourself. Stating clearly what you intend to do, usually within a certain time frame. This requires clarity about what you can and will do, and it's fundamentally linked to responsibility and integrity. The source also touches on how difficult it can sometimes be for people to say no when they're asked for a commitment they can't or don't want to fulfill, which is also a crucial aspect of managing promises effectively. And finally, declaring. This is making unambiguous statements of evaluation or conviction. This is where you state what you believe is good or bad, fair or unfair, right or wrong. It includes giving direct feedback, like you were right, or challenging something, this solution is not going to work, or maybe just stating a strongly held value or belief. I believe it's crucial that we prioritize safety above all else. You're making your personal stance or judgment clear.
Okay, so the I dimension is essentially about clearly stating your piece, backing it up logically, making commitments, and taking clear positions. Makes sense. The source uses a dialogue between Jane and Roger to show this in action. Jane wants Roger on a new project. She starts with a clear request. I want you to take on designing the overall architecture for the new Zymar project. Roger initially resists, using reasoning about his current workload, right? Jane persists. She uses reasoning about his unique skills and the project's importance, and she uses stating her conviction in his ability. I know you love a challenge. She even uses a declaration to appeal to a higher value. Sometimes we all need to look beyond and consider the greater context. And finally, as a declaration of praise, what I've always admired about you is your great sense of responsibility. This persistence with various I-dimension behaviors seems to be what drives the conversation forward from Jane's perspective, eventually getting Roger to at least agree to consider it.
Exactly. And for the I dimension to be effective, the source really stresses clarity and conciseness. Your statement should be concrete, specific. Their structure transparent. Labeling your statements can help too. Here's my proposal, or I'd like to declare my position on this. It just helps the listener follow along.
And that warning from Epictetus seems particularly relevant here. First and foremost, think before you speak. Prattle is seductive. Just because you can make a lot of arguments doesn't necessarily mean you should, right? Too much information or too many lines of reasoning could actually dilute your message, make it harder for the other person to grasp what's truly important or persuasive.
Absolutely.
Using the I dimension effectively is about purposeful articulation, not just talking a lot. All right, so that's the I dimension, making your voice heard. Now let's shift gears. Let's go to the U dimension. If the I is about my world, the U is about stepping into your world. The source highlights this shift. It's captured beautifully in that phrase. Seek first to understand and then to be understood.
That really is the core idea. The U dimension is fundamentally about curiosity. Genuine interest in the other person's perspective, their feelings, their experience. It's not about agreeing with them necessarily, it's about understanding them from their point of view. The key behaviors here are asking and listening, but, crucially, with a specific intention. Asking in the U dimension isn't just asking for factual information like, what time is the meeting? That's often an I dimension request, really. U dimension asking is about inviting the other person to share their inner landscape, their vision, their feelings, their concerns, their reasoning. It's probing to understand them. Questions like, how do you feel about what you've heard? Well, could you say more about why that's a concern for you? Or help me understand your thinking process on this. The intent is purely to gain insight into their perspective. And then there's listening. Specifically active listening. This means consciously setting aside your own thoughts, your own agenda, your immediate responses, to truly hear what the other person is saying, both verbally and non-verbally. It involves giving them your full attention and signaling that you're doing so maybe through nodding, eye contact, and techniques like paraphrasing or summarizing what you've heard to check your understanding. The source emphasizes it's more than just repeating words back, like a parrot. It's capturing the essence, including maybe underlying feelings or intentions. It requires parking your own brilliant solutions and ideas temporarily. You have to create the space for the other person to be fully heard. You're deliberately, yielding right of way to their perspective.
Let's revisit Jane and Roger again, but this time with the U dimension lens. Roger is hesitant about this Zymar project, calls it unknown territory. Instead of just pushing back with more I dimension arguments, Jane shifts. She uses U dimension asking. You understand that you mean there may not be many people around who can confront the challenges adequately. She's checking her understanding of his concern. Then she demonstrates listening, picking up on his nonverbals or tone. Tell me if I'm wrong, but I thought I caught a sort of glint in your eye when you talked about unknown territory. She's trying to understand his feeling, his potential hidden interest, despite the stated difficulty. When Roger mentions feeling swamped, Jane uses active listening by paraphrasing his situation and feeling. I get the impression that you'd really like to take on the Zymar project, if only someone else could take over some of your current work. This dialogue feels completely different from her initial I-dimension push. It's about Jane making space for Roger's reality.
It is, and the insight here is that effective U-dimension behavior isn't just a technique you pull out of a bag. It stems from genuine curiosity, a real willingness to see the world through another person's eyes. It requires letting go of your immediate need to get your point across, and trusting that understanding the other person first will ultimately make your own efforts to influence more effective down the line.
Okay, so we've covered the me-I dimension and the you dimension. What's the US, the bridge between?
That's the we dimension. This dimension is all about the relationship itself, the connection, the bridge between individuals. It's captured by ideas like it takes two to tango, or the metaphor of theater where success isn't just about individual performances, but the chemistry and collaboration on stage. It's about creating a shared space, a space of trust and mutual respect where you can move forward together.
Okay, and what are the key behaviors in this we dimension?
These are behaviors that really build connection and often involve a degree of vulnerability. It's not always easy. They include acknowledging, empathizing, sharing feelings, and disclosing needs. Acknowledging or empathizing is showing the other person that you see and respect their experience or perspective. Even if you don't necessarily agree with it, it's validating their reality for them, saying something like, I can see that you're feeling overwhelmed at the moment. That isn't agreeing that the workload is too much, objectively, but it's acknowledging their feeling about it, which is huge.
Right, validating the feeling.
Yeah, exactly. Then there's sharing feelings. This is expressing your own feelings candidly. The source makes a really crucial distinction here. It's about owning your feelings rather than blaming someone else for them. So instead of saying, you make me so angry, it's more like, I'm feeling angry right now.
Yeah.
Or linking it to an action. When you said that, I felt very irritated. It requires expressing your internal state with integrity, whether that's frustration, excitement, disappointment, or hurt, and disclosing needs. This is about making yourself vulnerable by stating what you need. Now, this isn't a demand. It's sharing an underlying motivation or maybe a gap that needs to be filled. It could be a need for help, for clarification, for recognition, for time, or even acknowledging your own limitations. The source emphasizes that disclosing a need requires courage. It's a step towards building trust, definitely not a sign of weakness. You're showing faith that the other person can hear and potentially respond constructively.
Let's see Jane and Roger one last time, this time through the we dimension lens. Jane starts by sharing feelings. Hey, Roger. I've been looking at the Zymar project, but I'm worried about some issues. Straight up. Then she discloses needs. My concern is about the software architecture. What's required would be breaking new ground for us, and I don't know if we're up to it. She's admitting uncertainty, a potential limitation. She connects it to Roger's situation by acknowledging his workload. I know how overloaded you are. If I were in your position, I think I'd have to say no. Then she shares feelings about the impact of his workload on her. So I'm feeling sort of lost at the moment. This open expression of her own feelings and needs and her acknowledgement of his reality, it totally shifts the dynamic, doesn't it?
It really does.
Roger responds by considering possibilities. I wonder if Bernard might be ready, and then discloses needs himself. I think it might work, but I need to feel confident that we can convince our manager. They are now sharing the challenge and their respective needs within it, like they're on the same side. Jane closes by sharing feelings again. I feel so much better already knowing that you are thinking along with me on this.
That's a beautiful illustration, really, of the we dimension creating a genuinely collaborative space. The insight here is that while the I and you dimensions are crucial for articulating your position and understanding the other, the we dimension is what builds the foundation. The foundation of trust and connection that's necessary for truly getting things done together. It requires vulnerability, sure. Often by dropping the mask we tend to wear at work. But the payoff, in terms of deeper relationships and more effective collaboration, is significant. Sharing difficulties can indeed have their burden, as the source notes.
So we have the three dimensions for positive influence. I assert, you understand, we connect. But the source also warns about behaviors that actively undermine this whole process. The negative stuff.
Yes, the negative behaviors. They are, by definition, ineffective, destructive, and often defensive. They basically serve to keep others at a distance and chip away at trust and relationships. The source likens them to dementors from Harry Potter, creatures that suck the warmth and positive energy out of an interaction, leaving a kind of black hole.
That's a vivid analogy.
It is, isn't it? It captures that feeling.
So what do these look like in conversation?
Examples include things like cynicism, sarcasm, trivializing, discouraging, and criticizing. Cynicism expresses doubt and lack of belief. Oh, that'll work, with that tone. Sarcasm uses mockery. Trivializing makes something important seem small or insignificant. Discouraging dampens enthusiasm or initiative. Criticizing puts down individuals or maybe even the organization itself.
And the fourth Jane and Roger dialogue shows the destructive power of these pretty clearly. Jane starts cynically, we probably don't have any time as usual, and trivializes the project. It's probably a waste of time. Roger uses sarcasm in response. Jane continues with cynicism and criticism of the organization. Roger tries to inject some positivity, but Jane just dismisses him with sarcasm. Mr. Optimism as always. And criticism, squirreled away as you are with your own little projects. The conversation just devolves instantly.
It spirals downwards so fast because negative behaviors shut down the possibility of constructive interaction completely. They create a climate of mistrust where influencing or getting things done together becomes basically impossible. The insight here isn't just recognizing these in other people, but also in ourselves. That's the hard part sometimes. The source prompts self-reflection. Do you belittle yourself or others? Do you use cynicism? Do you withdraw when challenged? Awareness is always the first step towards choosing a more constructive path.
Okay, so knowing the 3 dimensions and recognizing negative behaviors is one thing. But the source emphasizes that the real skill lies in flexibility, being able to move between these dimensions fluidly.
Absolutely. Effective communication is rarely about just sticking to one dimension. It's just not how it works. It's about reading the situation, reading the other person, and consciously choosing the behaviors that are most likely to help you achieve your objective while maintaining the connection. You might start with one dimension, say the I dimension, and then need to switch quickly based on the other person's response.
The source provides a table with some examples of these switches. Like if you've made a proposal, I dimension proposing, and you want to gauge the reaction, you switch to U dimension asking. So what are your thoughts on that?
Exactly. Or if you need to decline a request, maybe say no to a promise, I dimension promising no, but you want to maintain rapport, you might follow up with we dimension acknowledging, look, that's just not something I can do right now, but I can imagine that you find that disappointing. You acknowledge their potential feeling.
Or if you're disagreeing but want to stay connected, you might start with U dimension listening. Okay, so if I understand correctly, it sounds like you're saying. Then present your view using I dimension reasoning. I see it differently. I'd like to offer the following points. And if their view genuinely impacts you, you could even use we dimension sharing feelings.
Yeah.
Hearing that actually makes me feel quite concerned.
Right. Or, flip side, if you've built connection by disclosing needs, we dimension, I really need your help on this, you can then follow up with a concrete I dimension request. That's why I'd like to ask if you could reserve half an hour for a project evaluation with me. The insight here is that these dimensions are tools. Tools you combine and sequence deliberately. Mastery comes from being able to switch perspectives and intentions smoothly, depending on what the conversation needs. And switching perspectives is also crucial when dealing with difficult emotions, like irritation, which, let's face it, is pretty inevitable in high-pressure environments. How often do we hear or maybe even use phrases like, don't you ever listen, or your problem is you're just lazy?
All the time.
Yeah. They're judgmental, they're blaming, and they immediately escalate negativity.
They certainly shut down any chance of constructive dialogue. The source provides a 5-step method for managing irritation constructively, moving between the I and we dimensions. It's based on principles of nonviolent communication, right?
Exactly. Step 1, stating your observation. This is pure I dimension. Reasoning, describe factually what happened without interpretation or judgment. Example. John, you have interrupted me 3 times in the last few minutes, and I see you looking away when I'm trying to present my arguments. You're stating objective facts about behavior, nothing more.
Okay, factual observation. Step 2, expressing your feelings. This moves to the we dimension, sharing feelings. State your own feeling triggered by the observation, taking responsibility for it. The source is clear. Our feelings arise from how we interpret events and our unmet needs, not directly from the other person's actions. Example. I am feeling frustrated and disappointed. Notice it's not, I feel that you are rude, which is an evaluation, but I am feeling frustrated, stating your internal state.
Crucial distinction. Step 3, disclosing your needs. Back to the we dimension, disclosing needs. Articulate the unmet need that underlies your feeling. What do you need in this situation to move forward constructively? Example. I need to know that we understand each other and I need your support on this project.
Makes sense. Own the feeling, link it to a need. Step 4. Making a request. Back to the I dimension. Requesting. Ask for a specific positive action from the other person that would help meet your need. Avoid asking them not to do something. Ask them to do something constructive. Example, I would like you to listen to my proposal and my reasoning.
And the 5th step, which is maybe less elaborated in the example but implied, is offering an exchange. I dimension. Promising. Suggesting a willingness to reciprocate or find a mutual way forward. The power of this method lies in its structure, really. It moves you from reactive blame, which is so easy to fall into, to identifying the situation objectively. owning your feelings, stating your vulnerability, your need, and making a clear, positive request. It's a structured way to address conflict or irritation by focusing on needs and potential solutions rather than just exchanging judgments.
This structured approach seems to bring us back to a foundational element needed for pretty much any of these dynamics to work effectively: trust. The source dedicates significant attention to trust, noting how easily we use the word, but how often its true, complex nature is overlooked. Building trust isn't just, beneficial, it's absolutely central to creating positive working relationships and influencing others effectively. And the key insight here seems to be that trust is co-created, not simply earned or given unilaterally. It's a dynamic interplay between people.
That's a really important point. The source distinguishes three forms of trust, building on the work of Solomon and Flores. First, there's simple trust. This is the default, often unthinking trust we have in everyday life, trusting strangers to follow traffic rules, trusting directions. It's often unreflective and can be quite naive, actually. It's necessary for basic functioning, but it's insufficient for complex relationships or influence, and it's easily shattered by just a single violation. Second, blind trust. This is unquestioning faith, often demanded by authority figures, perhaps. It involves deliberately ignoring evidence that might contradict the trust, closing your eyes to it. While it can feel powerful and offer certainty, the source implies it's less about genuine relationship and maybe more about submission or ideology. Third, and this is the most crucial one for effective connection, is authentic trust. This is described as committed openness in the face of doubts and concerns. It's not naive, it recognizes risks and imperfections. It's built through shared experience and interaction. It requires a conscious choice to be open to another person, even when you have reasons to hesitate. It's really a function of the relationship itself, developed together.
The anecdotes in the book really illustrate the nuances of trust beautifully, don't they? There's the telecom CIO who was competent and admired by managers, but not fully trusted by his subordinates because he was seen as insensitive. It shows that competence, that I dimension stuff, isn't enough. Relational awareness, the you and we dimensions, is key to building real trust.
Absolutely. And the Edward and Balaji story, where a friendship built over time is suddenly rocked when Balaji has to make a tough business decision, layoffs that impacts Edward's team. Edward's trust is shaken because the action clashes with his underlying values about caring for people. Meanwhile, Balaji felt he was acting on his values about responsibility to the business. It shows how conflicts of underlying values, even when both people believe they're acting correctly, can profoundly impact trust.
And the Juliet and Nicole story. That one powerfully highlights how trust is broken by assumptions and lack of openness. Juliet, outgoing, invites shy Nicole out. Nicole feels uncomfortable, leaves early without explanation. Juliet feels betrayed, assumes Nicole is ungrateful. Nicole assumes Juliet would judge her discomfort, and so she retreats further. Neither trusted the other enough, or maybe themselves enough, to share their true feelings or needs, using the we dimension, or to genuinely inquire about the other's experience, using the you dimension. Both just acted on assumptions.
And the source is crystal clear on this. Trust cannot be built or maintained on assumptions about the other person's motives or feelings. It just can't. Building authentic trust requires a willingness to share your own thoughts and feelings, that's the we dimension, and to inquire after and listen to the other person's, that's the you dimension. Closing off and acting on unverified assumptions is a direct path to destroying trust.
This is particularly critical in teams, isn't it? The source cites research showing that authentic trust is absolutely foundational for effective teams. Without it, people are unwilling to be vulnerable, they hold back, discussions are guarded, views aren't fully shared. Decisions lack real commitment, and team results suffer because individual ego or self-protection takes precedence over the collective goal. Trust enables that open, sometimes vulnerable conversation where real issues can actually be surfaced and tackled together.
And rebuilding trust, it's difficult, no doubt. But it is possible. It requires deliberate, open dialogue. It demands courage to be absolutely open about oneself, patience, consciously avoiding assumptions, maintaining an open mind, and persistent attention to the other person. That quote from Eckhart Tolle is relevant here. In a genuine relationship, there is an outward flow of open, alert attention toward the other person. And maybe care is the key ingredient. Care for the relationship itself, not just the outcome of the immediate interaction. That's highlighted as perhaps the most essential ingredient of authentic trust.
It's clear that effective connection goes far, far beyond just the words we speak. The source emphasizes the vital role of nonverbal communication.
Absolutely vital. Our voice, our intonation, volume, facial expressions, posture, gestures, all these things, consciously and unconsciously convey meaning. The source cites Morabian's well-known statistic that especially when verbal and nonverbal signals are inconsistent, people rely much more heavily on the nonverbal cues. Things like voice tone, about 38%, and body language, about 55%, compared to the actual verbal content, only 7%, to interpret the real message. People are incredibly sensitive to the overall presence and nonverbal signals of others. We read them constantly.
And this connects to the idea of the emotional brain, right? The notion that feelings and emotions, often triggered by these unconscious nonverbal signals, drive a large portion of our behavior. It's something like 80%, according to a diagram cited in the source. And our nonverbal behavior, in turn, has a huge impact on others, maybe 93%, according to that diagram, regardless of our conscious verbal message. If your words say one thing, but your body language or tone says another, the nonverbal usually wins out in terms of perceived meaning.
Definitely. And this is where emotional contagion comes in the almost automatic spread of feelings between people. The source uses that powerful example of the Vietnamese monks protesting by setting themselves on fire during the war. Their nonverbal presence, their calm, their absolute commitment had such a profound emotional impact on the American soldiers watching that it reportedly led them to stop fighting in that instance. And of course, negative emotions like irritation or anger spread just as easily, if not more so. We're constantly influencing and being influenced by others' emotions, often completely beneath our conscious awareness.
So is this all just automatic? Or can we do anything about it? The good news, the source suggests, is that while much of this is unconscious, you can become more aware and even influence your nonverbal communication to some extent. It requires observation, watching others closely, maybe watching actors with the sound off, or even gulp, recording yourself.
Yeah, recording yourself can be revealing. And you can consciously link nonverbal behavior back to the 3 dimensions we discussed. For the I dimension, where you want to convey conviction and presence, you might use firmer gestures, stand or sit upright, project confidence through your voice and posture, make yourself bigger, in a sense. For the U dimension, showing interest and openness to the other person, you'd adopt a more open posture, maintain comfortable eye contact, allow for silences, maybe adapt your pace to theirs, and genuinely convey curiosity through your facial expression, leaning in slightly. And for the we dimension, building connection and showing appropriate vulnerability, you might lean slightly forward, allow for maybe a slight hesitation or softer eye contact. Your nonverbal cues should align with authentic feeling. This dimension thrives when your nonverbal communication is congruent with your willingness to be open and feel fully.
Wow. So much is happening below the surface of words, constantly shaping how we connect and influence each other. And speaking of things below the surface, the source also touches on cognitive biases, those mental shortcuts our brains take that can really trip us up without us even realizing it.
Yes, the source highlights that our minds can be, and often are, overconfidence machines, leading us to systematically misunderstand situations or other people. It lists several common biases. The egocentric bias, where we underestimate others' contributions compared to our own. The spotlight effect, overestimating how much others notice us. The false consensus effect, believing others think like we do. And the fundamental attribution error, blaming others' behavior on their personality but our own mistakes on the situation.
And that classic meta bias, the ultimate self-serving bias, where we think we are less susceptible to all these biases than other people are.
Exactly. The insight here is that these biases distort our perception of reality and of others. Being aware of them, even if we can't completely eliminate them, can help us pause and question our interpretations of interactions, especially when things aren't going smoothly. Are we assuming someone's being deliberately difficult? That might be the attribution error. Are we failing to appreciate their input? Could be egocentric bias.
Okay, so how can we increase our awareness of these hidden internal states? The biases, the unexpressed thoughts, the feelings. The source suggests a tool called the left-hand column analysis. Sounds intriguing.
It's a really powerful reflection tool. Simple, but powerful. You take a difficult conversation you had recently, draw a line down a page. On the right-hand side, you write down what was actually said by both people as accurately as you can remember. Then on the left-hand side, you write down everything you were thinking and feeling during the conversation but didn't say.
Ooh, that seems like it could be very revealing. Maybe a bit uncomfortable.
It can be, but that's the point. The purpose is to surface those unexpressed thoughts, feelings, and crucially, assumptions, particularly assumptions about the other person, about yourself, or about the situation. Then you analyze it. Were those assumptions justified? What was lost in the conversation because these things remained unsaid? How did those unexpressed internal states potentially create incongruence between what you said and your nonverbal behavior? Did they leak out anyway? And critically, how could acknowledging or expressing some of what was in that left column, maybe using we-dimension behaviors like sharing feelings or disclosing needs, have potentially changed the dynamic of the conversation? It's really about clearing those internal blocks to become more present and congruent in your interactions.
This focus on different layers of interaction leads us nicely to another model the source presents for understanding communication dynamics, the 4 levels of communication. The idea here is that any communication involves both the content of the message and the relationship aspect, right?
Exactly. The 4 levels are 1, content, the factual information being discussed, the what, the light is green. 2, procedure, the agreements or rules about how the conversation proceeds, the agenda, turn-taking rules, time limits. 3, interaction, the dynamic between the people talking right now, who's interrupting whom, who's leading, who's withdrawing, the pattern of relating. 4, climate feelings, the underlying emotional atmosphere, the mood in the room or the overall state of the relationship, tension, trust, frustration, openness.
Okay, let's use the example they give. Husband tells wife the light is green while she's driving. Content level, the light's color is green. Procedure level, maybe a simplistic suggestion to go. Interaction level, is a statement from him to her, maybe reflecting a certain dynamic or tone. Climate level, perhaps there's underlying impatience, or maybe just helpfulness. Could be anything, depending on the relationship context. So a simple statement is operating on all these levels simultaneously.
Precisely. And the key insight from this model is that when conversations break down, like in that frustrating meeting where nothing gets done, the issue is often not at the content level where people are arguing about the facts. They get stuck there arguing about the, horns locked, as the source puts it. But the real problem might be deeper. It might be at the procedure level, lack of a clear agenda maybe, or the interaction level, people constantly interrupting each other, or very often the climate feelings level, underlying mistrust or irritation making constructive talk impossible.
So to get the conversation back on track, you need to figure out which level the blockage is really on and address that level directly.
That's the idea. If there's high tension in the room, climate level, just arguing more about the facts, content level, probably won't help at all. It might even make it worse. You might need to address the feeling first, perhaps by acknowledging the tension, using a we-dimension behavior like acknowledging, I sense there's some frustration here. Then you might address the interaction. I notice we seem to be talking over each other quite a bit. Or the procedure. Maybe we need to take a step back and agree on how we discuss this point before you can effectively return to the content. Interventions at the interaction and climate levels tend to rely heavily on you and we-dimension behaviors, while interventions at the content and procedure levels often use more I-dimension behaviors, recognizing which level someone else is operating on, trying to get in step with them, and then responding flexibly by switching levels and dimensions as needed. That's a really powerful skill for resolving conflict and getting stuck conversations moving again.
This all sounds incredibly useful, but also a lot to think about in practice. The source doesn't just present these models and leave it there, does it? It strongly encourages experimentation and reflection.
Oh, definitely. That's because understanding these concepts intellectually isn't enough, not even close. True learning in these areas really comes through practice, through trying things out. The book suggests various exercises, things like consciously analyzing your own conversations afterward through the lens of the I, you, and we dimensions, or even actively seeking feedback from others about your communication style, maybe using a simple questionnaire. Experimenting with you-dimension behaviors could involve deliberately having a conversation purely to understand someone you normally disagree with, or just asking people more often about what motivates them.
Or trying out we-dimension behaviors, like deliberately seeking help when you need it, or accepting help gracefully. Reflecting on and maybe sharing your own feelings or needs in a safe context. Practicing acknowledging different viewpoints without immediately arguing, or even sharing a self-doubt with a trusted colleague or friend. Practicing that 5-step irritation method seems like a very direct application too.
It is.
And observing nonverbals, using the left-hand column analysis. These are all tools for conscious practice and building self-awareness.
And the source uses a really beautiful metaphor for this whole journey of self-awareness and skill building. The castle. Imagine yourself as a vast castle with thousands of rooms, each representing different aspects of yourself, different potential ways of being and behaving. As children, maybe we explore all these rooms freely, but over time, perhaps due to fear or judgment or painful experiences, we start to close off many of those rooms. We end up living only in a few familiar, maybe smaller ones.
And this closing off means we lose access to certain parts of ourselves.
Well,
Maybe the part that can be really vulnerable and connect deeply, we dimension, or the part that can make a strong, clear demand when needed, I dimension.
exactly. The process of growth and increasing your ability to connect and influence effectively involves rediscovering and gradually reopening those closed rooms. Experimentation and reflection are the keys. They help you explore your own potential, expand your range of available behaviors, and become more fully present and adaptable in your interactions. It's about being able to consciously choose and access the right room, the right behavior for the situation, rather than being stuck in the few you've habitually left open.
Okay, so to try and pull this deep dive together, we've explored the fundamental role of conversation and its growing importance in life and work. We've unpacked the three dimensions of influence: I, being heard; you, understanding others; and we, building connection, and contrasted these with those destructive negative behaviors.
Mhm. We've highlighted the crucial need for flexibility, being able to switch between these dimensions, and also between the four levels of communication: content, procedure, interaction, and climate feelings. Knowing how to navigate those levels is key to getting unstuck.
We've delved into the profound nature of authentic trust, emphasizing that it's something co-created through openness and vulnerability, even in the face of doubt, and how easily it can be damaged by assumptions and just a lack of care.
And we've discussed managing difficult emotions like irritation, constructively using a structured method. We've also recognized the vital, often unconscious power of nonverbal communication and emotional contagion, linking it back to how our messages are truly received beyond just the words.
Finally, we've seen that increasing self-awareness about our own biases, our unexpressed internal states, is absolutely crucial, and that deliberate experimentation and reflection are really the path to mastering these skills and metaphorically reopening those closed rooms within ourselves.
Ultimately, making connections and getting things done with other people isn't just about learning techniques, is it? It's about cultivating a deeper understanding of human dynamics, being willing to be present and open, having the courage to navigate vulnerability when appropriate, and continuously learning and adapting your approach based on what's happening. It's really about the conscious practice of building that bridge to others.
So, to leave you, our listener, with a thought to carry forward from this deep dive, think about that castle metaphor for a moment. What's one room, one aspect of your communication, maybe a behavior from the I, you, or we dimension that you feel you've perhaps kept closed off for a while? And what small experiment could you try this week just to peek inside that room? Or maybe consciously open the door just a crack in one of your interactions. See what you discover about yourself and see what happens in your connections with others.